We sent out some videos a couple of weeks ago, just with a show of hands. How many people have had a chance to look at those? Okay, cool, thank you. So we won't go through that again in heaps of detail, so I'm just going to put a patter over the top. But if there are any questions where you do want to dig in and ask any questions, just get stuck in, and Dan will get the microphone to you. So look, just kicking off, I know we covered the logic behind the changing across from the SIL brand to the nProve brand last year, but just to recap, we've got the current SIL system here on the left with the different evaluations that run under it and the different tools that we push out to industries, both for breeder use and commercial farmer use. And then we've got the new nProve technology stack that we're building up alongside. These systems are getting pretty long in the tooth, starting to get pretty expensive to maintain and difficult to maintain. And so the decision was taken after a lot of debate to move onto a new name. There are a number of reasons for that. Part of it was the fact that we need these systems to coexist at the same time while we're setting it up. And you know, obviously helps if we've got different names for them, but also the fact that nProve is, hopefully as you're going to see and have already seen, you know, stepping forward in terms of the technology that we're trying to make available to breeders and the rest of industry. And I guess the final point is also to be used for more than sheep as well, so that we can leverage that investment and you know, get a more cost-effective operating structure. But the intention is, you know, at some point, once the nProve tools functionality is where it needs to be, that we will decommission and turn off the current SIL technology stack. Our plan is, at this stage, we're working towards winter next year, is the plan when we want to do that. But in the meantime, we're definitely at this point where we've got both systems coexisting. But as we're about to see, we are working hard to push some of that functionality out to you and to the rest of industry while we're still in this in-between stage when we've got both these systems up and running. So yeah, so that's, I guess, basically the quick overview. In terms of the content that we want to look at now, we really want to break it into two halves. Just really show you what we've been up to in terms of the progress on the breeder tools, and then we want to change gears and show you the functionality that we've been working on for the publicly accessible tools, mainly focused on commercial farmers, and you know, hear your feedback in terms of what you think about those, and our plans in terms of how to roll that out. Next, we'll have a look at the breeder functionality, but just before we dive into that, does anyone have any questions, you know, just in terms of the summary or an nProve in general? Okay. So what I'm putting up on screen, and I'm sort of going to zoom this in and out a bit as we go through to try and help make it large enough on the projector. But what we're looking at here is nProve for what it's going to look like for you as a breeder when you sign in. Over here on the left are the main areas. One of those main areas is views, and that's what we're going to focus on in this session. There will be other areas, including data loading, and we can talk a bit about that, you know, in terms of how we're planning to go about that in a way where we still preserve the integrity of the evaluation later if anyone's interested. But for now, we'll stay focused on getting your data out, putting that in your hands. So you can think of a view as being pretty similar to the reports that you would get from your SIL Bureau today, except as you're about to see, we really are trying to put that capability directly into your hands, but still in a way where you can get that support that you need from your Bureau as well. So when I go into views, you'll see here that there's a bunch of standard views that I can go in and use. In this example, I'll go into dual purpose and we'll have a look at the selection list, and you'll see there's a bunch of sort of standard selection lists that we've gone ahead and created. I'm going to open up one of these. And so you'll see when that loads that It's sort of made up of two main areas, and this is a lot larger than it would be on your computer at home. I've just zoomed it up because we're on a projector. It would normally you'd have a lot more room for your data. But on the left here, there's a criteria area. And so this is where we've gone ahead and said, look, if you're doing a dual purpose use selection list, you probably only want to see your live animals born last year that are female. But you can go ahead and change any of that. If you wanted it to be other sexes, I could go and change that. I could change the years or the status if I wanted to include animals that have been culled. But I could also, let's say I want another criteria that wasn't provided by us. I can go ahead and add a new criteria and click Add Criteria. I want to add a criteria on an index. And in this example, I'll add a criteria on New Zealand maternal worth. So when I click Add Criteria, you'll see I've gained another one of these panels over in this area on the left. And so now, rather than seeing all 269 animals down here in the bottom right-hand corner, if I move this slider up and say we only want to see anything with New Zealand maternal worth above that number, or I could have typed the number in if that was quicker. When I reload, you're going to see that we now have only 46. And similar to what we can do in terms of controlling the criteria, that is, what animals we're going to see in here, we can do the same thing in terms of the columns of information that we want to see. So again, you can see we've put in here what we think is a good range of sub-indexes. But if I didn't want, say, DPG, I can go ahead and remove that. Let's say there's another column that's not here that I wanted to add. I can click Add Columns. And then I'll go and let's maybe add in some BVs. We could pop these two on. And you'll see those additional columns have now been added on the right. I can reorder these columns. I could put a sort on here. So let's sort by New Zealand maternal worth. Let's go descending to put our best animals at the top. So you can see pretty quickly, you don't have to build this from the ground up. You can grab these views that are already there, but the aim is that it should be pretty intuitive for you to be able to come in and customize these. You can then save that view, give it a name so that when you come back in at a future point in time, it's sitting there ready to go with all the customizations that you've made. We've also put a lot of work in to make sure that if you want to get your data out, that there's a good story there. So if I want to export that out to Excel, what nProve is going to do is create an actual Excel file, not a CSV file. So you're not going to face those problems where Excel drops leading zeros off sample barcodes or turns your tags into dates and all those sorts of things. Because nProve is creating an Excel file, we can completely control all the data types of the columns to make sure that everything that you're seeing is correct. And you'll see also you get a nice wee cover page here that tells you, I'll make that a bit bigger, that tells you what was in your view, what was the criteria that you had used, and an explanation of the different columns. So that's just a real quick run through of an example pre-canned view, but one of those views that's there waiting for you. Your bureaus will also have the ability to create views and share those out to you. So when you're on the phone with your bureau and you're asking for a particular selection list, they can actually go ahead and make sure that next time you come in, there's a view that's been created along the lines of what you're looking for. I won't save this, it's just an example, but just to give you an idea of some of the other functionality that's in here now. The example we looked at before, we were just pulling off an animal list, but you can actually get nProve to do a bit of grunt work for you now as well. So I'm going to ask for information on my flock. I want it summarized for my flock. I'm an administrator, so I need to enter my flock number. This is a research flock, so it's not quite going to give results like you would normally expect, but you can see because we're summarizing at the flock level, it can't list out all the tags, so at the moment it's just giving us a list of the tags or a list of the animals. And it tells us down below, it's probably a little hard to read, I'll make that a bit bigger, but you can see it's actually telling us about the assumptions that it's making in terms of how to best display this information. the place where it gets quite cool is that if I wanted to build, say, a genetic trends table, I could go in here and I could say I want to add genetic trends, so I want to see the year, and I want to see the genetic trends, say, for some of my key indexes. So I'll pop New Zealand maternal worth and maternal worth plus DAG score as some examples. And you'll see it's smart enough to know that, that because I put birth year on, I probably want to see the breakdown by birth year, and then it's going to give us those averages. And I could do other things too. I don't just want to see live animals anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that, so I'm seeing all animals. And I could broaden the number of years out to go back further in time. And it, you know, I'm just really pitter-pattering over the top, but you know, it is pretty smart. If I go in now and say add the sex of the animal in, it's going to do the same thing that we saw before, where it's now going to break down within each year by the gender of the animal. So we really sort of have tried to make it so that depending on which way you want to slice and dice your data, that pretty quickly you're going to be able to do that. But you know, we haven't tried to recreate Microsoft Excel. That's already a very capable tool. So like I showed, you know, demonstrated before, if you're starting to want to do things that are beyond what you can do in here, that's when you would just pull the data out into Excel and do that on your own computer. So that's pretty much everything I plan to demonstrate, unless anyone's got any specific questions. We had plans to have had this in your hands by now. We're really close, as you can see, to being able to push it out. We've just got one remaining issue we ran into with our testing, where if you used an outside sire, those aren't showing up properly because nProve is trying to be, you know, paranoid about making sure everyone's only accessing the information they should. In that case is being a little too careful, because if you've used an outside sire, obviously in a sire summary that needs to be there. You've used the sire, you have a right to see that information. So we're just getting that put on at the moment. We've got, the plan is to have bureaus in there and some of the breeders that were involved in the workshops late this year to get feedback in, and then a more widespread availability of that out to breeders early next year. And then in the latter part of next year, we're expecting to be working through that process of enabling data loading. Just one thing I'll say on that is that the right to load data is something completely separate from the right to approve data to move into the evaluation system. Today, when you send your information to a bureau, it's reviewed before it makes its way into the evaluation system. The permissions model that we've got in nProve follows that same convention. So we will have the dial set right round to the most cautious level we can when we kick this off. And any data files that are able to be uploaded by by breeders will still be reviewed and approved by bureaus. Sharon's got a point coming in later on around data quality, and you'll see a bit of a tie-in there in terms of what we may be able to do.
A question online too. Does it show the genetic trend graphs?
Yeah, great point. So no, at the moment we don't have any graphing capability in nProve at the moment. We've just sort of got it to that point where it can pull the data together. At the moment, if you wanted to graph it, you'd have to do that in Excel. But we have scoped that piece of work, and are hopeful we can get that funded for the future. So I'll just stop here at the breeder side and just get questions before we switch across and look at the public access commercial farmer screen.
Are you only going to be able to see your data? You're not going to be able to, like with RAM Finder now, you can look up any RAM and find all his progeny.
Great question. So at the moment, this is just focused on you working on your data or bureaus working on their clients' data. The next screens that we're about to switch over to, those are the screens that are for the Finder type access, the public access, where you can look at each other's data.
So that'll give you the same as what we've got now with RAM Finder?
I'm hoping it'll take us forward from that,
right.
But I'll ask your feedback once I've shown you. Yeah,
right.
yeah. Thank you.
Just briefly, will it work on a tablet?
Oh, great question. Yes, it will. Often I can actually do a demo here where I'll pull the view up I've just made on my mobile, and it will readjust itself. Some things drop away, And also a tablet will look more like what you're seeing at the moment. Yep. And that's iOS and Android. But you do need an internet connection. Yep. Any other questions about the breeder functionality? Okay, but just get stuck, and feel free to grab me afterwards if you think of anything later on as well. Where were we? Oops, we've jumped down. So, so now, as promised, we're going to switch across now and start looking at the commercial farmer screens is what we're labelling them. But you'll see there is advanced functionality in there for breeders as well, particularly around connectedness, and that's one of the topics that we're going to ask for your feedback today. So, so the first thing was in the at the Sheep Breeders Forum, we asked those questions about how you felt, about the level of information that was being shared, whether there should be more or less. We got pretty positive feedback in terms of the current level of sharing. So for now, we have kept this sharing the exact same information that's available in those tools today. This is obviously a big part of our commitment to deliver value to levy payers, the majority of which are commercial farmers who fund the majority of SIL. It incorporates breeder feedback. I could probably have a couple of slides of breeder feedback on the current tools, but there was a lot of criticism about the ordering of the results not being particularly fair. Maybe it advantaged the larger flocks. That New Zealand maternal worth and terminal worth, although a good representation of an average animal, the reality is that each commercial farmer has a different set of requirements, and is there a less blunt instrument, something more precise about the individual needs that we could do. And then there were some other points there around some breeder features that were requested and other things, but hopefully you're happy with that's been incorporated in what you're about to see. And then we had a lot of commercial farmer feedback as well around the current intuitiveness of the current tools. They wanted something more visual and didn't want to be drowned in numbers. Breeders know inside out what a good index number looks like. For a commercial farmer that's only doing that at certain times in the year, that can be a bit more challenging. So you'll see that that we've incorporated that into the tool. So I'll just get myself switched over. So what we're looking at here is code. This is development that's being worked on right now. Like, this software will be fresh out of the oven from the dev team. So so it's still a work in progress. But the idea is it will readjust itself if you're on a mobile device and look a bit different to this. But you can see it sort of spread itself out because it can see we're on a laptop computer. The first choice really is, are you looking for a terminal or a maternal animal? In this example, I'll go maternal. And you can see then that enables all of our buttons where we can say what it is we're looking for. The first of those is, what traits do I want? Now I'm going to zoom this up. It'll might get a bit strange on screen, but I'll just try and make that as big as I can. And you can see this is effectively building a breeding criteria. So as a commercial farmer, I can say, look, I'm looking for a well-rounded animal, so I'd like to be in the top half of, or thereabouts, of New Zealand maternal worth. Let's say I'm on particularly challenging country, and I've already got really good reproduction. I don't want to be straying into triplet territory, so I actually might want to pull the top of that down to not move into the extremes there. But survival is really important to me, so I want to be up in survival. And you'll notice as I set these sliders, this bar keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller to really communicate the fact that you can't have everything. The more I ask for, the more, the fewer choices I'm going to have. And all the other indexes are here as well, so I'm going to ask for some body condition is particularly important to me. But you'll see, as well as the health indexes, the production indexes are there and available to me too. Now I can go ahead and look at, and there are other options here, but for now I'm just going to skip over those. But much like Trade Me, I can narrow it to regions. I could narrow to breeds, change the year of birth, change my sex options. I could exclude certain flocks that I've already looked at and I'm not interested in. Then there's an advanced area, we'll look at that in a minute, but for now I'm just going to assume that I'm all good and I just now want to start looking at my results. So you can see it's highly visual. There's actually, in terms of the bars along here, I'll make that bigger. See how big I can get that. These bars along the top, you'll see, it's just the icons. But if I'm not sure what any of these icons are, I can just click on it and it will take me to a page where I can see exactly what they are, what the index values are, and the full name. I'll just point out one thing for the eagle-eyed. The percentages are that we're going to flip those around. So when we say 91%, that'll actually be communicated as top 9% to be consistent with the current tools and other species. I can also see the recording status for this flock. And again, if I'm not too sure what any of this means, I can click on any of these and I'll get a full description. The terminology that we've used in nProve for commercial farmers or for the public facing is not connected, but benchmarked, because that was the word that communicated the meaning most effectively. So you'll notice that there'll be no mention of connectedness in here, but they're the one and the same. And the bars, basically what we do, so we want to be fair to the smaller flocks, but also to the larger flocks. So what we do is we go to the flock, we look at where the sliders were set, we narrow that down to just the subset of animals that matched what the commercial farmer was looking for. And then for that subset of animals, and it says how many relevant animals that is, we then show the average percentile rank for those animals that matched what the commercial farmer was looking for. And we think that's the best way of being fair to the smaller flocks, but also not disadvantaging the larger flocks that could have a more diverse range of animals. And then finally, we take that and we calculate a likeness number. Now we'll do a separate video that gets down to the nitty-gritty of how we do that, but in short, we look at the traits or the indexes that the commercial farmer said mattered to them, the ones where they moved the sliders, and we look at, of those animals that you have that match what they were looking for, we look at how well optimized or how far to the top of what they asked for your animals are, and then that's how we decide how to order them. Now I can still go ahead and override that. I could still go ahead and sort on the breeder name or the number of relevant animals, but we think that this is a fairer way of default sorting the flocks that is fair for both small and large flocks, and we'll definitely invite your feedback on that. In terms of connectedness, the way the tool works at the moment is whenever, like if I'm in maternal, it's got to be connected for New Zealand maternal worth. I don't know if you noticed, and I can go back to demonstrate, but as soon as I move that DAG score slider, you saw it drop quite quickly in terms of the number of animals, because as soon as I say I'm interested in DAG, because we want to be able to show the DAG bars and make sure that they are benchmarked and comparable, then at that time it's only those that are connected for that gold trait group. And then just the final part of the demo, to link it back to RAM Finder, I can actually flag as a way of sort of tracking what I'm interested in. I should also say, sorry, that these numbers, breeder 578 and the farm names, these will not be displayed like that. It will show your actual flock name and your actual farm name. We've just anonymized them at the moment while we're testing the tool until we're sure it's calculating the right numbers before we start throwing breeder names up on there. But I can, if I click more info, you can still see who the actual breeder is and make contact with them or go to their website. So I'm going to flag one more. I'm going to say that I only want to see flagged flocks. So I can sort of put a pin in those flocks that I want to follow up with, and then I can also go look at some example animals. And it's going to do something very similar to what we just saw, except now instead of summarizing the percentile ranks of the flock, it's now showing them for those actual individual animals. As promised, there is the advanced area. you can, tell it you want to see the percentile values or the actual breeding values, which we suspect a lot of breeders will want to do. You pop on custom indexes. There will be a breeder login area that will give you additional functionality, but I guess that's one of the topics we did want to ask you today is, how we should best handle connectedness in a way that's fair. Our initial thoughts were that you really had to be a breeder before you'd be able to come in and turn the connectedness restriction off, but maybe that the room may have a different opinion. So with that, I'll stop talking and really throw over to questions from the room.
Hang on. All of the people want to hear what you're saying.
Sorry. What comes up now?
On the wool icon,
Yep.
so if I click on that, it'll just bring up the, sorry, it won't do, I should, this is code that's still being worked on. I'll do it on the flock. So it would just bring this up, and so it would show the index value and the average percentile rank for wool for the animals that meet the criteria in that flock.
So that's based around wool quantity at the moment? Okay. So will that change to wool value in time?
We have the wool quality module stood up. It's an additive index, so you can have the wool, which will still be quantity, and you can have an additional quality, which will take into account colour and fibre diameter, and added together gives you, the total value.
Anyone have any comments in terms of connectedness or any other questions?
Just you were saying before you could take the connectedness off. Where does that get you?
Well, and Sharon, what way in here? But I know there were two scenarios. The main one was breeders looking for other animals and are aware of the implication of where the gold trait group is not connected. The other, Sharon, was, I think there were some examples with some new traits that aren't quite connected yet.
For the first one, some of the smaller breeds are quite well connected to each other, but not particularly well connected to NZGE, so they want to be able to search amongst their group. In terms of the new traits, answer doesn't come to
Sorry,
mind.
that was the example I was trying to, I butchered.
Yeah, so we've got some of our smaller breeds that aren't as well connected to NZGE, but can be well connected to each other, and breeders are more au fait with what connectedness means versus commercial farmers, but some commercial farmers may want to see an unconnected flock if that's who they're buying off, but there's a bit of sophistication to understand that they may not be benchmarked correctly, and so the values aren't comparable. So some people just say we'll make it really clear by turning it yellow, but it still does require a level of understanding, so we're pretty cautious on that one.
Similar question. I think you've answered it basically. So if I'm a commercial farmer looking on here, will flocks that aren't connected not come up basically?
That's exactly right. So at the moment, the way we're heading, they would not. There will be a switch that we'll put into the advanced area, and I guess the question that we're trying to work through is, should that be only for breeders, or is that something that should be available for commercial farmers? And we're imagining there'd be some disclaimer that will pop up that would warn them in terms of what they're seeing. But yeah, that's the question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. If a commercial farmer decided to select every criteria, David,
Yeah.
is anybody in the country connected to each other?
If you go for every criteria very quickly, and Sharon, you got a great example from something in the past, but very quickly there's nothing left.
Exactly.
And you see that up the top here on this bar.
So particularly some of the health traits, there's very few guys connected, let alone doing the measures. So at what stage does it become irrelevant?
Yeah, so at the moment we're just relying on this bar getting smaller and smaller to make the point. But we will do something like, we've been talking about an idea of, once they move their fourth slider, that we may need to pop something up to say, something to the effect that you can't have it all.
I'm just going to say, for the commercial farmer, they're not going to understand a fair chunk. Why not have a simple graph that comes up when they click on there to start with of this is your percentile bands, top 5%, 10%, 20%, 50% of animals that are on your list that they're selecting for.
Yeah.
Just like your Angus Pure Index, you look around at any bull catalogue and they tell you exactly where the averages are in the country.
Yeah, so great point. And I should say too, we've workshopped this extensively, including a bunch of other designs with commercial farmers. So there's been a lot of commercial farmer input. I guess the two key differences were in the beef example, and same in dairy. There's few indexes and they're very well known. And there's probably whereas the feedback we've had from commercial farmers and breeders that on the sheep side, the different breeding objectives are more varied. And so this is what we're sort of trying to reflect here. Rather than it being a big drag race all on the same animals, the reality is that there are actually a lot of different scenarios that commercial farmers are chasing. And so we're trying to create something that sort of enables that, fit for your purpose, I think is the tagline in here. Something along those lines was why we had to deviate from that.
Is it not still good to see where those bands are though? Like if you wanted to pick for calving ease or says you put your main pressure on that, you still see where those percentages are?
Yeah, and so you can do that. Like you probably saw before when I went in, if I click on it, because we did have some commercial farmers that did say, look, I just want to see the numbers. Like I do want to know what the percentile is, but I just want to see the damn index value. So they can still click on it or turn that on and see it. But the majority of our commercial farmers, the feedback was the number's not important. I want to know what that means in terms of what I'm selecting from. They really want to see that percentile rank. Yep.
Hi David. Hey, just a question regarding the mid-micron index that we currently have in SIL. Is that going to be visible for breeders and commercial farmers, or is that part of the wool quality mod being revised at the moment?
To the production indexes, there is a fine wool index there for the Corriedale people. It's a wee jersey, I think. See, that's it there. So it is in there, but the mid-microns will be shifting to DPW plus DPWQ as the combination that will meet their needs. So that there'll be an additional DPWQ index in here.
Yep, one last one and then.
Genetic trends for individual breeders, for individual traits?
So when we asked the question at the last Sheep Breeder Forum about what information we're not sharing today that we should be sharing, I think that was the number one, if not it was the number two suggestion. That is something that we're looking at. I guess we thought this was a good starting point because this is based on the same information we're sharing today. And then once we've got this sorted out and that habit being developed, and in terms of the integration that Dan was talking about, the integrating this into the beef and lamb commercial farmer extension is obviously going to be really important. So we figured that's sort of our crawl or walk, and then engage in that discussion with breeders around things like genetic trends and other ideas that have been given to us about other information that could be in here, and should it be for everybody, should it be opt-in, and go through those conversations as a second step. Yep. Just before we wrap, if I'll be around afterwards, please make contact. My contact details are on the SIL website or any of the team here. I should say too, like what you're looking at and everything that we've looked at today is the combination of all the people that Annie put up on the slide earlier, heaps of input from breeders, bureaus and commercial farmers in the workshop. Can't emphasise how valuable that's been and how much what you're seeing changed based on that. But can I just get a show of hands in terms of what you're I should have also said, sorry, that in terms of where we're going to from here, There'll be a link sent out to all SIL flocks and bureaus, so you can actually go in, use the tool and have a look. Then we'll make it available to the commercial farmers that were in the workshop so that they can have a look and give us their feedback. And then once we've had a chance to work through that, then the aim is to really make it quite a soft and progressive launch. We'll start making that available, but really not until next season when we do a really big push in terms of this tool to give everyone, I guess, a chance to come to terms with it and a chance for us to get feedback in as well.